If a prosecutor exercises a peremptory challenge during jury selection and during a Batson hearing fails to give a race-neutral reason, is that a violation of the Constitution? To find out, you have to read People versus Estwick, but it's 4 pages. Don't have time for that? I've got you covered. This is TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read, where I cover New York Court of Appeals cases and I try to do it in 5 minutes or less. This is the episode on the case of People versus Estwick, published by the New York Court of Appeals on May 21st of 2024. The issue in this case is whether it is reversible error if the people fail to provide a race-neutral reason during the second part of a Batson challenge, and therefore reversible. To understand and appreciate the context of this case, I think the background that's helpful to understand is, first of all, what People versus Batson is. It's a United States Supreme Court precedent that says it's a constitutional violation if a prosecutor utilizes peremptory challenges in a discriminatory way. There's also a reverse Batson that can be utilized by the prosecutor can use if the defense is using a peremptory challenge in an inappropriate way. But there's basically a 3-step process outlined by the Batson case. The 3 steps are this. First step is that the objecting party has to establish a prima facie case of discrimination, the use of discrimination in the exercise of a peremptory challenge by a party during jury selection. And if they establish step 1, then you go to step 2. At step 2, the party that is accused of being discriminatory has to explain why they utilized the peremptory challenge. And they have to come forward with a neutral explanation if that's the reason why they used it was a neutral reason. Because they were doing it on the record as an officer of the court. They have to provide the actual explanation, and ideally, it's a race-neutral and gender-neutral and non-discriminatory reason. And then it goes to step 3. And at step 3, the trial judge then has to adjudicate, has to determine whether the objecting party has proven purposeful discrimination. If it's established that it's purposeful discrimination, the jury will be seated despite the use of the peremptory challenge. You can't use peremptory challenge discriminatorily. Now, that second step, that step about a race-neutral reason, doesn't have to be the best reason in the world. It just has to give a clear and reasonably specific explanation of the legitimate reasons for exercising the challenge. Has to be based on something other than race or gender and must have facial validity. Doesn't have to be a good reason, just has to be, doesn't have to even be persuasive, plausible, or even make sense as long as it's neutral. Okay, so what are the facts in this case? The facts are the defendant was charged with first-degree and second-degree robbery, felonies. And during jury selection, the prosecutor exercised a peremptory challenge against a juror named KS, that's the initials, to remove KS from the jury as a potential juror. KS was an African-American female who worked for the police department. At that point, the defendant exercised or made a Batson challenge and established a prima facie case of discrimination regarding the use of the peremptory challenge. That's step 1. Now it goes to the prosecutor for step 2. And at that point, instead of the court requiring the prosecutor to explain the rationale behind the use of the peremptory challenge, the judge stepped in and said the prosecution had gotten a bad vibe from KS, regarding whether prior jury service resulted in an acquittal. And at that point, the prosecutor didn't say a word. So at step 2, the judge jumped in, gave a reason, and the prosecutor didn't even acknowledge or say, I agree or anything. The court then went to step 3 and said that the prosecution had given a legitimate race-neutral reason. The defendant was ultimately convicted and appealed. It goes to the appellate division and they affirm what the trial judge had done here. And it goes to the Court of Appeals on appeal. And here, the judges reviewing this in an unanimous decision say this was a Batson violation. Why? They say the court was merely speculating as to the basis of why the prosecutor exercised peremptory challenge, and that speculation was irrelevant because the Batson question is about what was in the mind of the party that exercised the challenge, not what the judge thinks was in the mind of the party exercising the challenge. Only the prosecutor would know why, in fact, the prosecutor exercised that challenge. So step 2 requires the court to consider step 2 requires the prosecutor give the actual explanation, which hopefully is race neutral. And then step 3 requires the court to determine whether it's valid. So by stepping in at step 2, it taints step 2. It messes up step 2. And the court can't actually adjudicate the validity of step 2 when the court is the one that gave step 2. So conviction reversed, new trial ordered. And that's the case of People versus Estwick. Have a good day. If you like what you just saw and want to see more just like it, Please hit like or subscribe to let me know.